Well, hey there and hello, and welcome to the attic of the dollhouse for another reading from Grimm's Complete of Fairy Tales. That's right. Oh, we about to have us some fun now, huh? And now tonight, I got a little surprise in order here directly. But first, we gotta get the mood set. And how do we do that? Well, we get the lights out, we get the fire crackling element going there, and we play us a little crossharp. And tonight I got my brand new low F Suzuki valved harp. That's right. But I also have me a Hona regular F harp. So let's see what they sound like. The difference there. Oh, a little bit of difference there, right? The low and the regular high F harp. I had to get me one that was a little low, because that F is too high, if you ask me there. So, in any event, hey, what are we reading tonight, you may be wondering? Well, we got us another theme of Shorties coming up. That's right. As if you remember the last reading, it was a dead children. And hopefully we break that theme. That's right. All right, and the first tale we're going to tell is of the Tailor in Heaven. All right. One very fine day it came to pass that the good God wished to enjoy himself in the heavenly garden, and took all the apostles and saints with him, so that no one stayed in heaven but St. Peter. So Peter stood by the door and kept watch, and before long someone knocked. Peter asked who was there and what he wanted. "I am a poor honest tailor who prays for admission," replied a smooth voice. "Honest indeed," said Peter, "like the thief on the gallows. You have not light-fingered and have snipped folks' clothes away. You will not get into heaven. The Lord has forbidden me to let anyone in while he is out." "Come, do be merciful," cried the tailor. "Little scraps which fall off the table of their own accord are not stolen, and are not worth speaking about. Look, I am lame and have blisters in me, and I will do all the rough work. I will carry the children, wash their clothes, and wash and clean the benches on which they have been playing, and patch all their torn clothes." St. Peter let himself be moved by pity, and opened the door of heaven just wide enough for the lame tailor to slip his lean body in. He was forced to sit down in a corner behind the door, and was to stay quietly and peaceably there, in order that the Lord, when he returned, might not observe him and be angry. The tailor obeyed, but once when St. Peter went outside the door, he got up and, full of curiosity, went round about into every corner of heaven, and inspected the arrangement of every place. At length he came to a spot where many beautiful and delightful chairs were standing, and in the midst was a seat all of gold, which was set with shining jewels. Likewise it was much higher than the other chairs, and a footstool of gold was before it. It was, however, the seat on which the Lord sat when he was at home, and from which he could see everything which happened on earth. The tailor stood still and looked at the seat for a long time, for it pleased him better than all else. At last he could master his curiosity no longer, and climbed up and seated himself in the chair. And then he saw everything which was happening on earth, and observed an ugly old woman who was standing washing by the side of a stream, secretly laying two veils on one side for herself. The sight of this made the tailor so angry that he laid hold of the golden footstool, and threw it down to earth through heaven. And at the odd at the old thief, rather. As, however, he could not bring the stool back again, he slipped quietly out of the chair, seated himself in his place behind the door, and behaved as if he had never stirred from the spot. When the Lord and Master came back again with his heavenly companions, he did not see the tailor behind the door, but when he seated himself on his chair, the footstool was missing. He asked St. Peter what had become of the stool, but he did not know. And then he asked if he had let anyone come in. I know of no one who has been here, answered Peter, but a lame tailor who is still sitting behind the door. And then the Lord had the tailor brought before him, and asked him if he had taken away the stool and where he had put it. "Oh, Lord," answered the tailor joyously, "I threw it in my anger down to earth in an old woman whom I saw stealing 2 veils at the washing." "Oh, you knave," said the Lord, "were I to judge you as you judge, how do you think you could have escaped so long? I should long ago have had no chairs, benches, seats, nay, not even an oven fork, but should have thrown everything down at the sinners. Henceforth you can no longer stay in heaven. You must go outside the door again, and then go where you will. No one shall give punishment here, but I alone, the Lord." Peter was obliged to take the tailor out of heaven again, and as he had torn shoes and feet covered in blisters, he took a stick in his hand and went to a wait-a-bit inn, where the good soldiers sit and make merry. Ooh, and that has been, what tale was that? The Tailor in Heaven. And now let's read us another one. Poverty and humility lead to heaven, rather. You ready? There was once a king's son who went out into the world, and he was full of thought and sad. He looked at the sky, which was so beautifully pure and blue, and then he sighed and said, "How well must all be with one up there in heaven." Then he saw a poor gray-haired man who was coming along the road towards him, and he spoke to him and asked, "How can I get into heaven?" The man answered, "By poverty and humility. Put on my ragged clothes, wander about the world for 7 years, and get to know what misery is. Take no money, but if thou art hungry, ask compassionate hearts for a bit of bread, and in this way thou wilt reach heaven." Then the king's son took off his magnificent coat, and he wore in its place the beggar's garment, went out into the wide world, and suffered great misery. He took nothing but little food, said nothing, but prayed to the Lord to take him into his heaven. When the 7 years were over, he returned to his father's palace, but no one recognized him. He said to the servants, "Go and tell my parents that I have come back again." But the servants did not believe it, and laughed and left him standing there. Then said he, "Go and tell it to my brothers that they may come down, for I should like to see them again." The servants would not do that either, but at last one of them went and told it to the king's children, but these did not believe it, and did not trouble themselves about it. And then he wrote a letter to his mother and described to her all his misery, but he did not say that he was her son. So out of pity, the queen had a place under the stairs assigned to him, and food taken to him daily by 2 servants. But one of them was ill-natured, and says, "Why should the beggar have the good food?" And he kept it for himself, or gave it to the dogs, and took the weak, wasted-away beggar nothing but water. The other, however, was honest, and took the beggar what was sent to him. It was little, but he could live on it for a while, and all the time he was quite patient, but he grew continually weaker. As, however, his illness increased, he desired to receive rather the last sacrament. And when the host was being elevated down below, all the bells in the town and neighborhood began to ring. After Mass, the priest went to the poor man under the stairs, and there he lay dead. In one hand he had a rose, and in the other a lily, and beside him was a paper in which was written his history. And when he was buried, a rose grew on one side of his grave, and and a lily on the other. All right, and that has been Poverty and Humility Lead to Heaven. All right, and the next Grimm's fairy tale here we're going to read is The Flail from Heaven. A countryman was once going out to plow with a pair of oxen. When he got to the field, both the animals' horns began to grow and went on a growing. And when he wanted to go home, they were so big that the oxen could not get through the gateway for them. By good luck, a butcher came by just then, and he delivered them over to him, and made the bargain in this way, that he should take the butcher a measure of turnip seed, and then the butcher was to count him out a barabant thaler for every seed. I call that well sold. The peasant now went home and carried the measure of turnip seed to him on his back. On the way, however, he lost one seed out of the bag, and the butcher paid him justly as agreed on. And if the peasant had not lost the seed, he would have had one thaler the more. In the meantime, when he went on his way back, the seed laid grown into a tree which reached up to the sky. Then thought the peasant, as thou hast the chance, thou must see what the angels are doing up there above, and for once have them before thine eyes. So he climbed and saw the angels above were threshing oats, and he looked on. While he was thus watching them, he observed that the tree on which he was standing was beginning to totter. He peeped down and saw that someone was just going to cut it down. If I were to fall down from here, it would be a very bad thing, thought he, and in his necessity he did not know how to save himself better than by taking the chaff of the oats which lay there in heaps, and twisting a rope out of it. He likewise snatched a hoe and a flail which were lying about in heaven, and let himself down by the rope. But he came down to earth exactly in the middle of a deep, deep hole, and so it was a real place of luck that he had brought the hoe, for he hoed himself a flight of steps with it, and mounted up, and took the flail with him as a token of his truth, and that no one could have any doubt of his story. All right, hey, that was The Flail from Heaven. And let's see, we've got us one more. Let's see if it holds the theme here of heaven, as it's titled The Moon. In days gone by was a land where the nights were always dark, and the sky spread over it like a black cloth. For there the moon never rose, and no star shone in the obscurity. At the creation of the world, the light at night had been sufficient, for young fellows once went out of this country on a traveling expedition, and arrived in another kingdom, where in the evening, when the sun had disappeared behind the mountains, a shining globe was placed on an oak tree, which shed a softer light far and wide. By means of this, everything could very well be seen and distinguished, even though it was not so brilliant as the sun. The traveler stopped and asked a countryman who was driving past with his cart what kind of light that was. Well, that is the moon, answered he. Our mayor brought it here for 3 thalers and fastened it to the oak tree. He has to pour oil into it daily to keep it clean, so that it may always burn clearly. He receives a thaler a week from us for doing it. And when the countryman had driven away, one of them says, we could make some use of this lamp. We have an oak tree at home which is just as big as this, and we could hang it on that. What a pleasure it would be not to have to feel about at night in the darkness. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do, said the second. We will fetch us a cart and horses and carry away the moon. The people here may buy themselves another. I'm a good climber, said the third, I'll bring it down. And the fourth brought a cart and horses, and the third climbed the tree, bored a hole in the moon, passed a rope through it, and let it down. When the shining ball lay in the cart, they covered it over with a cloth, that no one might observe the theft. And they conveyed it safely into their own country, and placed it on a high oak. Old and young rejoiced when they saw the new lamp let its light shine over the whole land, and bedrooms and sitting rooms were filled with it. The dwarfs came forth from their caves in the rocks, and the tiny elves in their little red coats danced in rings in the meadows. And the four took care that the moon was provided with oil, cleaned the wick, and received their weekly thaler. But they became old men, and when one of them grew ill and saw that he was about to die, he appointed that 1/4 of the moon should, as his property, be laid in the grave with him. When he died, the mayor climbed up the tree and cut off 1/4 with his head shears, and this was placed in his coffin. The light of the moon decreased, but still not visibly. And when the second died, the second 1/4 was buried with him, and the light diminished. It grew weaker still after the death of the third, who likewise took his part of it away with him. And when the fourth was borne to his grave, the old state of darkness recommenced. And whenever the people went out at night with their lanterns, they knocked their heads together. When, however, the pieces of the moon had united themselves together again in the world below, where darkness had always prevailed, it came to pass that the dead became restless and awoke from their sleep. And there they were astonished when they were able to see again. The moonlight was quite sufficient for them, for their eyes had become so weak that they could not have borne the brilliance of the sun. They rose up and were merry, and fell into their former ways of living. Some of them went to play and to dance, and others hastened to the public houses where they asked for wine, got drunk, brawled, quarreled, and at last took up cudgels, and belabored each other. The noise became greater and greater, and at last reached even to heaven. St. Peter, who guards the gates of heaven, thought the lower world had broken out in revolt, and gathered together the heavenly troops which are to drive back the evil one, when he and his associates stormed the adobe of the blessed. As these, however, did not come, he got on his horse and rode through the gate of heaven, down into the world below. And there he reduced the dead to a subjugation, bade them lie down in their graves again, took the moon away with him, and hung it up in heaven. And that has been the moon. And I'd say it carried the theme through to the end, even if a little disjointedly. That's right. And that has been the moon and a few other shorties from Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. Well, I hope you enjoyed those. I know I liked the moon there towards the end. It was all over the place, wasn't it? Up in heaven, down in the earth, raising the dead, and it apparently runs on oil. That's right. Okay. I got an affiliate link for this book down in the description if you're interested in picking yourself up a copy and supporting the channel in the bargain. I highly appreciate it if you do, but hopefully you just pick up your own copy and enjoy. That said, let's take us out with a little bit more of crossharp there. That don't work too well, does it? All right, hey, there you go. And as I like to say, a tip of my hat to your old cat. Kisses for your missus, and I hope you come back now again. You better, you understand? I hope you do. All right, you take care of yourselves, and we'll see you later.